financial survival network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to carrylutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
Great news, we've got a sponsor. This show is now brought to you by Miles Franklin. And when it comes to protecting your wealth, you know there's nothing better than gold and silver. That's what I'm buying. I hope you're doing the same. And once you make the decision to buy gold and silver, there's no better place than Miles Franklin. Look, they've been in business 22 years. And the reason I'm a customer is because when you buy, they ship. Go to milesfranklin.com or call them at 800-822-8080 to get a free quote. 1490 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. Sometimes you need an attorney, a finance expert, and a media person to really explain things, to show you how the markets aren't functioning, how they aren't performing their purposes. And for that, we have Danielle Park, a money manager, reformed attorney like yours truly, to shed some light on the ever-deteriorating moral and financial and societal trends that are taking place right now. Danielle, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, thanks, Kerry. I'm good. Although that's a little bit of a grim thought, that intro. The decline of civilization as we know it.
Well, everything ebbs and flows. 100 years ago, things looked great. They go back and forth, and as long as one side can't totally shut the other side up, maybe we have a chance.
Yeah, maybe we do. We know the rules that have been established through trial and error over centuries of humanity. We know certain rules that are that serve everyone in the big picture. I think that what happened is that we became so selective in those who were wanting to extort everything out of the system and basically leave nothing for anyone else. I know that some people don't believe in any idea of a greater good. Typically very extreme right-wing people will say, that's baloney, I don't believe in a greater good, it's every man for himself, or it's let pure capitalism dictate everything. And I just think that at some point, if you're living in a civilized society, there has to be some rules and a roadmap and consequences in order to keep the society from devolving into the Middle Ages again. And we as humans are always at risk of, that slide into immorality or whatever you want to call it, that basically breaks the back of civilized rules. And so here we are, we've had this period of time where too many people got to control everything. The revolving door between governments and business, even pure capitalism has been under fire the last number of years because we've nurtured weaker and weaker leaders who have not survived and profited by merit in many cases. They've done so by controlling and getting unfair advantage. That's not a robust model. That's not how you grow strength in individuals, companies, or economies. And so now we're in this phase where we've got a bunch of weaklings and a bunch of under-trained participants who are all worried about when they get the next hit of sugar from, a central banker rather than what kind of business model will serve going forward.
Yeah, a little bit distressing. It's almost appears that the system has been intentionally undermined to get to choose the very people that you're referring to. And we don't go into politics here because to me it's trans-political. It's about economics. It's about the very nature of what government is supposed to be. But yeah, the rule of law seems to have gone out the window. We saw it starting in the U.S. Where it really became obvious with GM's bankruptcy and Chrysler's, where the secured debt holders who had been protected by over 200 years of jurisprudence, really longer than that, going back to England, secured creditors always came first. And then all of a sudden, the government comes on the scene, they write a check, and the secured creditors are trashed. And then I trace it next to MF Global, where, they stole the money. They were entrusted with funds. They had a fiduciary obligation to see to it that customers' funds weren't bet at the casino. And effectively, they just took all that money and bet it at the casino and allowed the creditors of MF Global to grab that money that they were never entitled to have to use in the first place. So you think this is part of a trend where the rule of law is really kind of diminishing in all aspects of our lives, huh?
Yeah, I think the unifying premise is, you're right. The bailout at Chrysler was probably the start of it, and you had it all the way up through the, so many savings and loan, but then it just kept going. You had the whole bailout of long-term capital in the late 90s. You had, I think Alan Greenspan was truly the poster child for this hubris of government and central bankers to believe, and business leaders, frankly, because they were all in the club together, but they truly believed that they knew better, that they were omnipotent and strong beyond anyone individually, and that they could control. They believed that they could backstop, write checks, save, manipulate, and control, and that they would create a robust system. I don't think they did it because they thought they were weakening the thing. I think they actually believed their own nonsense. But the problem is that in the process, they degraded the rule of law, the systems, the checks, the balances, the banking system. Faith and fiduciary have been flushed down the toilet. And so now they got a system where most of the participants in capital markets that do any kind of serious thinking or math have stepped aside from things like stock markets. You've had net outflows. I saw some interesting statistics on this. Net outflows from U.S. equity funds every single year since 2005. You haven't had a positive inflow year since 2005, Carrie. That really tells you something about how that model of, blind faith, tossing money in and hoping for the best has really been on the decline for years. And I think it's just picked up in the last few years as more and more sugar intervention and manipulation. That's the more sober people are saying, what is this disaster? Like, what the hell is this? And, today you saw a big rally in late morning today because someone else came out talking about, the Wall Street Journal floated some article about QE3 might be coming in a sterilized fashion. And you see a couple of people trading some Dow contracts. That's the kind of dynamic we're in, where the economic data is one thing, the global picture is one thing, and you get sugar hits into asset markets every time a central banker promises the next leg of something.
Yeah, and really, what's the news there? I saw that come over the Wall Street Journal wire, that they're going to come up with QE3 improved. But the fact is that the money that they've given the banks has been sterilized anyway, because the Fed is giving them a 1.25% interest on reserves that are deposited there, and I guess that's M0 effectively. So they've been sterilized. We're still having the inflation. It's like somebody thinks that you could just wave a magic wand and put the money over here in this pocket, so when you're reaching into your other pocket to pay the bill, you won't pull any bills out of that money. That's sacred. And it ain't going to happen. This is smoke and mirrors. It's strictly illusion. And it looks like our leaders, especially the Ben Bernanke there, is the head illusionist in the government. And that is distressing, because they're not telling us the truth. They're not telling us that we're in a global economic depression. If people knew that, they might be saving a few more dollars, and maybe that would hasten the demise of certain companies. I don't know, but people really don't get how tenuous and serious the situation is, do they?
I don't know in general. I know that I talk to a lot of people through the blog and correspondence they send me that are individually understanding the dynamics. And I've certainly done everything in my power the last number of years to educate people on this is the scenario. Debt must come down in various ways. Consumption will not come back to the peak of '07 or '06 levels. China will slow because Western consumption is not on credit steroids in the domestic economy going forward. You've got that very scenario playing out. And so the solution is not put yourself into more risk assets. The solution is work longer, save more, live on less, squirrel away nuts for later. That is the true message. But you're up against the full force and power of the financial industry, which has been in control for the last couple of decades and basically selling everybody on the idea of more credit, more risk, more leverage, buy now, pay later. So there's been this sort of brainwashing that's gone on in popular culture. And I think individually people are starting to wake up and have been for a while. Usually, it comes to a crisis point in their own life where they say, wow, I don't want to ever be that worried again, or I don't want to ever lose my home again, or something that triggers them, and then they say, we just won't do that anymore, and they actually shift their behavior. So I think there's hope in that because people are starting to do it and sort of discount all the baloney that you hear over. Here's an interesting thing. I was flipping through last night. I like to watch 60 Minutes as one of the few genuine, decent journalism shows anymore. Let's put it that way. In our world of bought and paid for media of all kinds, you get very, very shallow breadth of topics for discussion typically now on mainstream television. So 60 Minutes I find still a useful amount of journalism goes on there. Have you noticed that CNBC has recently bought the rights to have 60 Minutes on at night?
I saw that. That was amazing to me. Yeah, I saw that.
I'm like, one of my themes I've been talking about for the last few years is that mainstream business television that was born in the secular bull run, in the leverage bubble that ran up into the 2000s is on the decline, and that their utility will become diminishing as the internet and shows like yours and, real truthful discussions circumvent the mainstream media. But here you go, CNBC. Not only were they giving me 60 Minutes last night while I was watching, they were also interspersing it with 4 commercials per break about their own show. So you have CNBC advertising about CNBC in the midst of this new, approach. And I thought to myself, wow, here you go. This is them losing viewership all along because their message is so useless and harmful and constantly bullish. And people have 12 years of losing money have said, you know what, good Lord, you people are a nightmare. You always say the same thing. I get nothing but harm from you. So people have shifted away from watching, and now they're going, wait, let's go get mainstream America, who maybe hasn't been watching us and doesn't know what a horrible track record we have. Let's go grab 60 Minutes and toss it on. And in between, while we've got those new eyeballs, we will hammer them with, we are so smart in business and we are the leaders and this and that. I just thought it was a very telling little predicament.
Hey, and what you're saying is they're really grasping because they won't admit the fundamental error in their business model, which is that it's built on falseness. It's built on fraud. If you're an investor and you listen to these people, you're heading to bankruptcy. You're going to be broke. Because housing prices never go down, because stocks, you just buy them and hold them and everything will be fine. That's not to say there aren't certain investments you can do that with, but you can't do these things blindly. And housing prices do go down. And you know what? Wall Street can have a losing decade, even though it hasn't happened much. And debt is good and savings is bad. And why work so hard? And, they've sold us a bill of goods, the media. They sold us a lifestyle that isn't sustainable and that isn't fulfilling. It's really empty. It's vacuous, and it leaves you wondering what the purpose of your life is. But just shifting a little bit. All right, you're Joe Sixpack. You see that you've been lied to, that the whole thing is a scam. What do? How do you protect what little wealth you have? And what is the formula for not getting sucked into the scam again, right? That's really the important thing, right?
Yeah, well, I think it is. You get really honest about what you can afford. You get really honest about what money you have and what money you don't have. You stop trying to put on airs or pretend or maintain a certain level of material aspects if it's financed. Okay, you keep your cars, you drive them a long time. For example, you don't keep getting a flashy car on a new loan every 2 or 3 years. If you've got a big mortgage on your house, and this is Americans, Carrie, I know because of the tax deduction, you guys have been sort of incited to carry big mortgage balances, even into your 60s. I'm amazed at the amount of Americans who have large mortgages even past their 50s, and the rationale is always, well, it's tax deductible. I think that will not serve. I think that people will realize that there's more to life than a tax deduction. What about some peace of mind? What about positive net worth? What about not having payments spoken for every time you get a dollar? And so people are saying, you know what I don't really need a bunch of risk that's blowing me up every 3 or 4 years. What I need is just some good old-fashioned debt management, paying down, saving, working longer. And when people do that, I mean, listen, if you have $2 or $3 million today, you still probably should be working unless you can afford to live on, $60,000 a year of sort of income off that, 60 or 70. If you can and you're happy with that, great. But if you're going to live into your 80s and you're in your 50s now, that's 30 years. That's a long time to be drawing income and not seeing your capital grow. And so I think we need to adjust and be realistic about some of those suppositions that were, again, part of the prior phase, haven't been in it for a number of years, won't be for probably another 15 to 20 years before we get into that kind of overheating and leverage and credit markets again, if history's a guide. So it'll just be a long period of more rational habits, and that's good. It's good. It doesn't serve anyone to have elevated profits and the appearance of wealth when underneath it's rotting.
Yeah, you just made me remember something, because I remember my mother-in-law. She had acquired a little bit of assets, a little bit of wealth. And, at the time she was 70 something, and she was like really nervous because she just had her portfolio improperly balanced. She really needed the income so that with the Social Security, she would have enough to live on. And I told her, get rid of your house. This thing is a money pit. She owned it free and clear. Go buy a condo, where your friends are. She's in Wisconsin. I said, get the hell out of this place. What do you need these cold winters for? Go play golf in Arizona and hang out with your grandchildren. And she just couldn't think about it. But we did rebalance her portfolio. And she said, I don't know what to do. I said, well, first question is, how much longer do you plan to live? Mm-hmm. And she looked at me, man. She was like, she had fire in her eyes. And I didn't mean anything by it other than you got to be thinking about your lifespan and how much money you need to get through it. And your point of eliminating the debt, maximizing your savings. Also, hey, you don't necessarily have to live in the U.S. or in Canada. You can go to lower, if that's what you want to do, you could go to countries where you can have a better lifestyle for less money, but that's a personal preference. And, this whole return to basics here of work and save, that went out for the past 30 years while this debt bubble emerged, and now it's really coming back. And debt isn't necessarily bad in and of itself if you use debt to build cash flow in the proper way, where you're not going to get wiped out if things go badly. Hey, if you can borrow money and get cash flow and keep doing that, and you're not going to get wiped out, that could be the right way to go. But it just is amazing that they're still trying to sell that old line of 0% interest, 0% financing. What do you got to lose? Upgrade that car, buy that house. And the message, just like you say, the sugar hits, it's falling on more and more deaf ears, because I think people are starting to figure out what's going on in the economy here, what really is happening, and that we're effectively, at best, you could hope to keep it what you have, but more and more people are getting poorer through this economy, right?
Well, yeah, because a lot of people didn't save enough, or put too much of the assets in non-productive real estate, which is now proving to be a misallocation, or they quit work too early and plan to withdraw too much from the capital that they did have. So let's go back to tactics here. We're not saying the world will have no growth. We're saying the world will have more reasonable amounts of growth than it did in the hyper inflation phase of the credit bubble. So, China targeting 7.5% growth rate going forward versus almost 11 that it was at the peak. That may sound not so bad, because 7.5 is quite a bit. But when you realize that that India is down at about 6% growth rate, that Brazil has dropped to about a third of the growth rate it had in 2010. That the U.S., even after more than almost $5 trillion of stimulus in the last few years, is barely moving forward at this point. Japan's contracting, so it's just it's not. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not actually. Sometimes when I talk, people say, "Oh God, that's a depressing." You're really depressing. It's like, why is that depressing? Why is it depressing to say that the real equilibrium of growth, the sustainable, is somewhere quite a bit lower? World growth was above 5 at the peak. Global growth, it's probably around 3 today. And that's still in a fairly moderate expansion, So why is that? I don't understand why that's considered negative. I think it's a healthy thing.
Yeah, well, unrealistic rates of growth over time will lead to these misallocations and will lead to depressions. There's no question about it, and it emanates from overly generous credit expansion, money expansion. That's the business cycle. It's going to exist no matter what. But the problem is that inflationary excess production of money will really drive it to further extremes than when there was a gold standard, a fixed money supply, and countries had to account. So anyway, Danielle, we got to finish up. So if I'm looking for you, where do I find you?
Jugglingdynamite.com is my blog. I write on that pretty much daily, and that's the best way to keep track of my market thoughts and links. And also I have email there if people want to drop me a question.
Great. So they can click your contact tab and send you a question, because, some people get inundated. I'm getting inundated now to the point where, you have to triage it. Okay, you got serious questions, then you got people that are important questions, and then you have people that are forget it. So it gets difficult. You know what it's like, right? I
really do try and answer everyone. And once in a while I get one and I think to myself, you know what? That's just so rude. It doesn't deserve any response. But that's very rare.
I got a thing from an atheist a couple of weeks ago. He was appalled because I said, we pray for this person's well-being. And it wasn't a religious thing. It was like, we hope for it,
It's a phrase, yeah.
Yeah, and how many legal papers have you done where you have a prayer for relief? It's not you ask God to help you win the case. Yeah. And I'm like, I really shouldn't answer this, but it really ticked me off. But I was as nice as I could be. But hey, that's part of it. It's important. People should email us with questions, because you got to get the knowledge to get through this thing. And there's more and more places to get it, but if you don't ask, you're not going to find out. So
yeah, and my thing about religion is people moved away from religion in the society in the last while, and that's fine. I have no opinion about that. But my complaint is they started worshiping at the altar of Goldman Sachs and Company, and I think that's got to be a bad call.
Yeah, there's no gold left in Goldman Sachs, and really, it's hopefully a return to values of what's important, because we all want money, we all want to do well materially, but when your family is suffering, when your life is a mess, when you're out of control because you're just, and we both know these traders who, like, the stress, the tension is like killing their souls, rotting them away. It ain't worth it. You have to find something else. Anyway, Danielle, hey, thanks for being on. We'll have you on again soon.
Awesome.